Alright, so we're on to problem 20-6A. And so in this one, we have a situation where a company gives us information of what they plan to do and then what they actually did. And so it kind of gives us a little analysis here. So we have this dozer company. I don't think it tells what kind of product they sold, but it says there's just one product. And so what they did was they had, they planned on having sales of 2.75 million, got us to a contribution margin of 1.386. So they actually sold, had more dollars in sales. They had less variable cost, less variable cost of goods sold, more variable SG&A, and then had a better contribution margin than expected of 38,000. They actually sold less units. They planned on selling 22,000. They actually sold 1925. The sales price was higher than expected. They expected to do 125. They actually sold it at $144. Their variable cost of goods sold per unit was a little bit higher, and their variable selling SG&A was a little bit higher as well. And so it asked us to prepare a contribution margin analysis. So what we're going to do here, since there's two factors that changed, their price per unit changed from what was expected to what actually happened, and the number of units sold was different. And so what we're going to do is we're going to take this contribution margin here and figure out this difference and basically assign it to either, hey, this is changed because of units sold, or this is changed because of the price per unit. So we'll go over here and we'll start off with the planned contribution margin. So they give that to us here at 1.386. So that was the planned contribution margin. And so we had a change of sales of 22,000. And so part of that was due because they sold less, and part of it was due because they sold it for a higher cost or higher dollar amount per unit. So the amount that was related to the quantity sold, that's going to be the quantity actually sold minus the quantity planned on selling times the planned price. Whoops. Oops. Times 125. I'll do it the cheating way. Alright, so the change in sales was 22,000. So that matches over here. And so that means our sales revenue went down $343 because they sold less units. But our revenue went up because they sold it for a higher price of $365,000. So net these two together, $22,000 difference. So then looking at the variable cost of goods sold, the difference because they sold less units would be the units that they planned on selling minus the units that they actually sold times their planned cost per unit. And then the difference in the variable cost of goods sold, because their actual cost per unit was higher, that's going to be their planned cost per unit minus their actual cost per unit times their actual price. So when their variable cost of goods sold, they had a their variable cost of goods sold was lower because they sold less units, but the variable cost was higher by $77,000 because it was a higher cost per unit. So because they sold less units, it would have been $140,000 savings because they sold less, but since their price per unit went up, it netted out to a $63,000 difference on the variable cost of goods sold. And then on the selling administrative cost, that's going to be the planned units minus the actual units times the planned price. And so for the unit cost difference, that's going to be the planned cost per unit minus the actual cost per unit times the actual units sold. And so in this situation for the selling SG&A, the selling SG&A was lower because they sold less units by 30,000, but overall it was higher by 46,000, and that's because 77,000 was because the cost per unit went from $11 to $15 per unit. So that gets us, we had a planned contribution margin of 1.386. We actually had a contribution margin better than we expected of 1.4. And so we have several factors going in here. So this could be a combination of the number of units sold plus the cost per unit. So all our numbers match over here. So then in part number 2, says at the board of directors meeting, the president was reviewing and makes the following comment. Said it looks like if the price increase of $19 had the effect of decreasing sales volume. However, this was a favorable trade-off. The variable cost of goods sold was less than planned. Apparently, we are efficiently managing the variable cost of goods sold. However, the variable selling SG&A costs appear out of control. Let's look into that and see if we can get it back under control. Let's also consider increasing the sales to $160 per unit. This is a favorable trade-off between the higher price and lower volume. It says, do we agree with this? And of course, it would be too easy if we actually agreed. We don't agree with him. And so what he's looking at is he's saying, hey, our variable cost a unit is down by $63,000. That's really good. So that must be okay. And so if we go up here and look at what's going on, so really our variable SG&A is not that great because mostly it's just down because we sold less units, not because we're being efficient. The cost per unit is a sign of being efficient. So our cost per unit actually went up from 51 to 55. So while overall it went down by 63,000, there's probably actually an efficiency problem in our cost of goods sold here. So we would actually want to say, hey, no, our variable cost of goods sold are not good. We need to take a closer look at what's driving our cost up there. And then for the variable selling SG&A cost, so he's actually right here. He says, yeah, the costs are higher. they are higher per unit, and so we probably should look at that. However, in this situation, we have higher SG&A costs per unit. That could very well be because we raised our price from 125 to 144. So our salesmen are probably having to do more work to actually convince customers that that's a justified price increase from 125 to 144. So when he's saying, hey, we should increase to 160 and we'll probably lose more volume, but we'll be okay, that's probably not a true statement, because we're probably going to get worse here because our cost per unit keeps going up as our volume goes down. That's not a good sign. And then we're probably not going to be able to cure the inefficiency in SG&A, because if we have to convince customers that, hey, going from 125 to 144 to 160 is justified, that variable cost unit is probably going to go up as well. So the problems, when you just look here, are actually not, what looks good is actually not good in the fact that our actual variable cost per units are going up. So even though the variable cost in total went down, per unit they're going up. So that's not a good sign. So we probably would not recommend. We need to look into both the variable cost of goods sold and the variable SG&A, and more than likely increasing price further would not have a favorable impact overall. So